All right, let's talk about three different tales of abortion, views of abortion, contraception. Bernie Sanders, and this is from a report in Newsweek. How many different areas of key policy, and I'm not going to let people take this away from Bernie Sanders. It's become ridiculous. It's either somebody actually saying, like, no, you should have supported the Reagan backed death squads and lack of independent determination for people in Latin America in the 80s, which you should not have. And people should remind themselves that, things like opposing the Contras and having at least some understanding of why the Sandinistas come to power in the 80s was, of course, part of the left and people like Sanders. But people like Chris Dodd and John Kerry were profoundly critical of Reagan foreign policy there. In fact, why did Iran-Contra happen? Because the Democratic Congress in the 1980s made it illegal to formally fund the Contras. That's why the Reagan administration did it with illegal arms sales and funneled the proceeds back to them. So, Bernie Sanders, right on civil rights, right on Vietnam, right on income inequality, right on the 1980s in Central America. Wrong on some things, but let's be real. There's a lot of consistency of right here. And wrong on some things, evolving on others. Here's another one he was totally right about. Newsweek. A 1972 article surfaces showing that Bernie Sanders backed abortion rights a year before Roe. Vermont independent Senator Bernie Sanders backed abortion rights and ridiculed male-dominated legislatures governing women's bodies in a 1972 article surfaced Wednesday. The commentary reveals another stark, decades-long contrast between he and former Vice President Joe Biden's progressive stances. Thank you, Newsweek. That's exactly the way I was going to frame this segment. Sanders told Vermont's Bennington Banner newspaper in September 1972, months before the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling on Roe v. Wade, that abortion procedures should only be concerned between a woman and her physician. The article cites several letters the then Liberty Union candidate for governor wrote to a local newspaper calling for the abolition of all laws dealing with abortion, drugs, and sexual behavior. It strikes me as incredible that politicians think they have a right to tell women that she can or cannot do with her body, Sanders told the Bennington Banner on September 1st, 1972. This is especially true in Vermont, where we have a legislature which is almost completely dominated by men. I'll just note, because there's still this, aggressive, ludicrous propaganda campaign waged against him as somebody who, in spite of having impeccable credentials on this area specifically, if he doesn't phrase a response exactly according to the TikTok in a Chuck Todd interview, people flood him. But this is an unimpeachable commitment, not only to the right position on this issue, but even, of course, to the structural misogyny and ludicrousness of men, in fact, even having anything to say on this issue outside of women and their doctors. Now, back to Biden for a second. Back to Newsweek. Biden, who was a Democratic senator in Delaware from 1973 to 2009, stated Wednesday that he still backs the 1976 Hyde Amendment. The measure prohibits the federal use of funding for abortion except in cases of rape, incest, and when a mother's life is in danger. In 1977, when Biden voted against a measure to allow Medicaid to fund abortions for any victim of rape or incest. Despite his opposition, the exception passed, and a year later, Biden again voted against the same measure to protect a woman's life at risk. In a 1972 article entitled Abortion Up to Conscience, Not Government, Sanders relays the Brooklyn-born Vermont politician's progressive stance that liberals would be slow to embrace for decades. Abortion, this is Sanders, is an issue which brings out deep feelings in people, and I respect the feelings of those who opposed abortion on moral grounds. I feel, however, that these people should not be allowed to impose their sense of morality or religious feelings on other people who hold a different opinion. Perfect. Exactly. Now, jumping forward a little bit more, and we will get to that sound in a second. But I also just want to say that it wasn't even just abortion that Joe Biden, along with things like school integration, we could pick any period when we talk about Joe Biden's record. We could talk about the role of drone warfares, the role, whatever role he may have played in the Obama administration's economic policies and putting major cuts to Medicare and Social Security on the table during the Obama administration. We could talk about being in the Senate, writing the crime bill, supporting the invasion of Iraq, writing vicious bankruptcy legislation, which Elizabeth Warren got her start in public life fighting against. But now we'll just go retro, and we'll go to his 70s and 80s stances against abortion and his opposing civil rights. But it didn't end there. Because according to a new report in The Intercept, all the way up to being a vice president in the Obama administration, quote, Joe Biden sought to repeatedly undermine the Affordable Care Act's contraception mandate, working in alliance with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops to push a broad exemption that would have left millions of women without coverage. Biden's battle over contraception is a window into his approach to the politics of reproductive freedom, a function of an electoral worldview that centers working-class Catholic men over the interests of women. The issue has been causing his presidential campaign some discomfort. On Wednesday, Biden's campaign clarified that he remains a supporter of the so-called Hyde Amendment, a provision that bars federal money from being used to fund reproductive health services. So let's actually, we'll get to that clip next and make it two segments. But these are the two leading candidates in the Democratic primary right now. One candidate who has 100% voting record every step of the way in every aspect of women's reproductive freedom and choice and sovereignty, opposes the Hyde Amendment, which is horrific in terms of its impact on poor people and totally class-based warfare politics, who wrote a column not only having the right position, but identifying the sexism of the counterposition in 1972 while presenting it respectfully, which I'm sorry, in an electoral sense, in no way in a policy sense, is still appropriate and correct. This guy is running for president. He's one of the options. That's Bernie Sanders. Then there's Joe Biden, who in 2019 supports the Hyde Amendment. That is incredible commitment. That is a genuine reactionary streak. That isn't even expediency. We got to give him that. And then a whole media infrastructure of people who have an irrational, bizarre hatred of Bernie Sanders and are going to say like, well, you know, when he endorsed full abortion rights and vigorously condemned, and we're not even going to mention, and he didn't even mention, actually used his fundraising list to raise money for grassroots organizations fighting the assault on women in places like Alabama. He paused and cleared his throat before he condemned the Georgia legislation. So that proves that he's a total bro. Joe Biden's, no, I mean, you know, hey, it was the 70s, man. You know, sometimes you oppose busing and Medicaid exceptions for women's life being in danger. Give me a fucking break. Look, if you want to support Joe Biden, that's fine, whatever. But be real about what you're supporting and stop making up shit about Bernie Sanders. Because not only are you lying about his position now and through the 90s, we even have a freaking 1972 column before Roe v. Wade. Just give up the ghost. Stop.
Yeah. I mean, I will say there is the constituency of people who were doing that to Bernie last time around don't seem to like Joe Biden very much either, right? Like there is a constituency of
some of them
sincere liberal women who care more about gender. That's the lens through which they view the world. A lot of the time because they have an income level such that is the primary axis along which they experience oppression. And the last time around, they really, really just wanted to have a woman in charge, which I get it.
Totally,
but
of course.
Given these two choices, I don't think they're going to back Biden. I think they are backing a lot of other candidates at this point in time, including Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, et al. And it'll be interesting to see where they go to as more and more of these candidates drop out of the race, because Joe Biden absolutely does not appeal to these people. He's making his claims to a socially conservative constituency. And he's like, when he jokes about like the Me Too stuff or whatever, that's what he's doing. He's playing to them.
Well, this is really, I mean, yeah. I mean, and to really underline, like, just for this, I want to keep it super focused on that. Like the Hyde Amendment stuff and the votes on abortion in the 70s are, this is not on, it's.
No, I know
this
they're
is
not on
like
the same level.
Structural and going into arguing and undermining. Not only was it wrong on the merits and the policy with Obama, the Obama administration, even on an operative, real politique level, used the contraception issue enormously effectively in Obama's reelection.
Yeah.